Welcome to another DragonLance Saga Dungeon Mastering 101 episode. It is Palast Darkember, the 17th. My name is Adam, and today I'm continuing my Dragonlance Gaming series all about dungeon mastering. Knowing the various types of players helps you anticipate and manage them in your game preparation and throughout the game itself. Let's take a look at some of the player types, their behaviors, how to engage with them, and their potential pitfalls. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and you can support this channel by becoming a patron on Patreon or a member on YouTube. You can also pick up Dragonlance Media using my affiliate links. All of those are in the description below. All right, so there are 8 different types of players that I'm going to be covering today. This is all broken down by a number of sources. First and foremost is my own playing experience. Being a DM and being a player and sitting around the table and noting how different people engage with the session in very, very different ways. But you also have one of the strengths, I think, of 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons that people don't really talk about is that it gives you a really nice, clear guideline for player types. And that's one of the things that Extreme Dungeon Mastery 2nd edition did as well. It gave some really clear guidelines on types of players, how to help them out, how to engage with them, and how to sort of cater your DMing style to those types of players. And I want to say this sort of on the outset as I start having this conversation. While I have these 8 sort of player archetypes mapped out, I'm not calling anyone out on being any one of them. I think in general, people usually straddle the fence on a couple or a few of these different ones, depending on how they feel in the moment, how experienced they are, how invested they are in the game. There's a lot of external factors which dictate how a player engages on a given session, let alone in a given campaign. Sometimes I'm running a game and I can see people are clearly bored, not paying attention at all. When their turn comes up, I have to recap everything that we just went through because they just weren't paying attention. Other times, you have people that are just jumping the gun, trying to get in on their turn, or you're asking them what they want to do and they just don't really know. And they have to sort of examine and think think tactically about, where the situation is right now, what they could possibly do. And so as a dungeon master, a game master, it is really your job to help nudge and steer players in specific directions. And it's all with the underlying idea of maintaining some semblance of pacing. Now, pacing is entirely up to you as the GM or DM and the players themselves on whether they want like a role-playing heavy session or a combat session or some hybrid between or something else entirely. But you always want to maintain at least a comfortable pace so that combat feels like it has motion to it, that it has inertia, that it will someday end. And that if you're having a deep role-playing moment, that you don't want to take away from the gravity of that moment potentially, but you also don't want everyone else sitting at the table sitting around bored while you engage one-on-one with a player or with 2 other players, So it's always a delicate balancing act that the Dungeon Master finds himself in when trying to manage the game flow, the pacing, and the different types of players. So let's go ahead and just dive in on and start talking about the different types. So I'm going to give you an overarching of what I'm going to be going over. I'm going to be talking about the actor, the explorer, the investigator, the power gamer, the slayer, the storyteller, the thinker, and the watcher. And again, these are just archetypes that I've sort of distilled from different sources in my own experience. I would love to hear if you have any player types that I don't potentially talk about, or maybe are hybrids of them, and what you think of them. And do you identify as a specific type of player? And to know right off the bat, there are no wrong answers. However you like to play Dungeons & Dragons is the best way to play Dungeons & Dragons for you. You don't have to conform to anyone else. You just have to have fun. That's literally the only goal of the game, is just to enjoy yourself with other people in a communal storytelling setting. All right, so let's start with the actor. So what are the core motivations of an actor-player? It's going to be embodying a character's personality, voice, and emotional journey. The behaviors that this type of a player is going to be exhibiting, they're going to speak in character, they're going to use voices, sometimes they're going to dress up in costumes. They're going to like to build personality-rich backstories and motivations. They really enjoy dialogue-heavy scenes with NPCs and PCs, and they love to roll for unexpected social or flavor actions, namely behaviors, to see what happens. Because ultimately, the actor needs some sort of interpretive help. It's like a yes and improv for them. And they need some sort of like guidance when it comes down to it. Now, there are pitfalls to watch out for when it comes to the actor players. Over role playing can slow down a session. But again, it depends on the type of game you're running and how comfortable everyone else is in the situation. And then, of course, using the quote, "But that's what my character would do," in order to justify disruptive choices. I've heard this so much in my gaming life, but that's what I think my character would do. And as long as it doesn't disrupt the actual game, well, that's totally fine. But if it completely destroys the game, well, then that's a problem. Because why now, out of the rest of the time you're playing, did it suddenly decide to, break everything down? Let's make sure that there's actual reasons and justification, and, they have to bring the receipts if they're actually going to go down that road. Otherwise, you're just actually being antagonistic to the dungeon master and the other players, and it can be seen as passive aggressive, and it can also be seen as just overtly destructive and just troublesome, Hey, Ravenclaw, how you doing? As a forever DM, it has been so long since you played, you don't know what player type you are. Nice. You're the little dungeon master guy. That's the type. All right, so the next player type that I sort of see a lot is the explorer. Now, this is someone that loves discovering new locations, loves discovering secrets, and getting in on inside lore and detail about the world. They love to search and engage with the environments, and this is mixed with some of the other types. One of my favorite player types to engage with, because you know that they're going to be uncovering any Easter eggs that you may have slid in there. And it's always a lot of fun. So behaviors that this type of the explorer player character exhibits, they're going to ask for environmental details like maps and names and cultures. If you are a DM who is not prepared for an explorer player type, this can mean you're on your back feet all session long, because they're asking questions that you didn't think of and you have no idea the answers to. And so you're just having to improv on the spot. Some DMs are great at that. Other DMs struggle with it incredibly. And so knowing the types of players that are in your game is going to actually tell you whether you need to prepare that stuff or not. I always have a sort of a hybrid approach to it, where if it's germane to the narrative, then I'll throw in a couple notes and stuff like that. If it's totally random stuff, then I'll just improv it, because you can't anticipate everything as a DM. Let's see. They like to investigate ruins, mysteries, and world history. They enjoy atmosphere as much as the plot or combat. And they traditionally move the party onward in search of the next unknown. And this can be a really great player to have at the table, especially if you have indecisive player types. And we'll get to those in a second, where they're not sure where they want to go, or they just want to think about it for a little bit. Otherwise, you just have a player just sort of like, no, this is what we're going to do. Let's go. And sort of pushing everyone along. Now, you can engage with this type of explorer player type by presenting vivid locations, including cultural lore and secrets and treasure clues. You can reward their curiosity with discoveries. Let them know that you're paying attention to their wants. You can use evocative descriptions, maps and props and handouts. ultimately, in all of these player types, always consider in one session doing your best to reach out to each and every player, meeting them where they are, and trying your best to include them in the ways that they really want to be included. So there are some pitfalls to this player type as well. They can exhaust the table or the DM with excessive micro detail requests, thereby slowing down the pace of the game. Using world knowledge metagaming to solve exploration. So if this is not a homebrew game and you're playing in a campaign setting like, oh, I don't know, Dragonlance, and the player knows everything there is to know about Dragonlance, well, then they're using their world knowledge on a meta level in order to inform the player character's choices and actions. And in general, I don't mind a little bit of that as long as the actual character, due to their race, experience, or class, know that information. But if they just fundamentally have no idea, I cannot stand anything more than players bringing existing knowledge to a table and not even playing their characters at that point. They're just playing. And that is the antithesis to role playing. That's just you. It's not the same thing. All right. So it's always a fun player type to have at the table. You just need to make sure there's a balance, and usually having a conversation with them if they do bring up that metagaming aspect in the moment to sort of squash it immediately usually just solves the problem altogether. Metagamers are the bane of our existence. Hallelujah. Absolutely, man. All right, the next player archetype I've identified is the investigator. Now, this is the individual that makes things happen fast, whether it's chaos or risk or impulsive action. They just like to, instigator, not investigator. They like to get things going. Now, the behaviors that you're going to see out of this type of player is that they open trapped chests just to see what happens. They like to provoke NPCs and trigger encounters prematurely. They like to save sessions from lulls with decisive action, and they love consequences, even bad ones. I would make an argument that in most of my games, most of my players are instigators. Just watch my sessions and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So how do you engage instigators? Well, you include tempting objects and risky levers and feisty NPCs. You feed into how they want to play the game. You let their actions shift the environment or escalate danger. Rather than saying, don't do that, you are ruining this, just be like, okay, well, I guess this is going to happen next. Allow chaos without wiping the entire party. I actually take a slightly altered state. If the player characters want to make choices that kill the party, I'm going to let them do that because it's their player. And if they want to go off on that tangent, well then players are dead. That's what happens in the game. I don't like to have guardrails in place where you're like, whoa, if you do that, you're gonna kill someone. I'll use like, are you sure? Does this fit in with your character? I'll have those type of leading phrases. Can you explain why you're doing this? Types of questions. But ultimately, everything is the player's choice. And if they want to take risks and kill the entire party, that's on them. I'll just have them create new characters or get new players. It's really that simple. Pitfalls to watch for the instigator type player. Getting the group killed. Look, people get attached to their characters. That's just the reality of it. You play long enough and people sort of see themselves as their characters when they're playing them. And that can actually be troubling because it means they are more risk averse, which is antithetical to the game, or they're overly emotional when something negative happens, which can also be sort of troubling to the game itself. But that's just the reality of playing something consistently for so long with one single character, You can't help but get attached. Another thing that they do, the instigator, they derail sessions with constant impulsive sabotage. Now, there is a point where DMs should be able to help manage and steer and course correct if someone is actively derailing the campaign. But there's also a point where the players are doing it intentionally, and maybe they're just being frustrated with you as a DM or just something going on in real life, but they just are not in it. Ideally, the player would say, I'm not feeling this. I'm just not going to play this session because I just don't feel like I could be a productive member of the team, and you move on. But if they don't, then you as the DM have to have a conversation with them. I run into this from time to time, and you have to be like, are you doing this on purpose? Why are you doing this? What is happening? Do you want to play in this game? You have to have those types of questions because clearly something is changing and people are acting differently than they normally do. So the impulsive character, the instigator character type, player type, can be a lot of fun, but they can also be very destructive. So always be open to having honest conversation between DM and players. And I would extrapolate that out just to human beings in general. Be honest with each other. It resolves so many problems. You may have momentarily hurt feelings from the honesty, as long as you're not trying to be brutal in the process. But that's how you learn. That's how you become better, or how you may not even realize that you're doing certain things. And unless someone's honest with you, you'll never realize it. So it's always, in my opinion, best to be honest with people and just tell them, look, you're clearly not really engaged with this game. Do you want to still play? Or you're making choices that are very destructive. Do you really want to play? And just explain the behavior that they're engaging in and why it's an issue, if it is an issue, and then have an open, honest conversation about it. All right. So the next player archetype here is the power gamer. We all know these. I would make an argument that D&D 2.5 edition and 3rd edition especially cultivated this type of a player in Dungeons and Dragons more than, at least in my experience, more than any other type of game system. It is 2.5. They went down an insane road with minutia of character builds, and then 3.5 ultimately, because no one really played 3. 3.5 completely destroyed D&D in my opinion, where they kitted everything out and everything was just min-maxing and it was just bananas. I played a lot of 3.5 edition D&D, a lot of it, and I did not enjoy most of it. And I ran a whole lot of 3.5 and I didn't enjoy most of it. By the time 4th edition came about, as bad as it was, I was actually excited because we could get rid of the power gaming element. And it had its own version of it, but it was so different that it took people a while before they got to that min-maxing capacity again. And then we just moved on to 5th edition when it came out. So anyway, Chris, how you doing, man? Unless they're a Kender and then it's understood why they're being destructive. To a certain degree, yeah, for sure. So power gamers. Core motivations of a power gamer is mechanical power, leveling, cool abilities, and winning. Now, the behaviors of this player archetype, they like to optimize builds with math and system mastery. They like to chase magic items, combos, and new abilities, and they focus more on character power than story itself. Now, there's nothing wrong with having power gamers in your campaigns. You just have to know how to meet them. It's going to require you doing a whole lot of research because you know they're doing a whole lot of research. And ultimately, what I've always found is power gamers will get to the point of breaking the game system and step over the line to being broken. And they'll wait for the DM to pull them back. So power gamers love to get away with shit. And they will, unless you as the DM call them on it. And ultimately, all players and DMs should understand that the DM is the final arbiter. I don't care what a ruling is in a book. I don't care what AI says it should be. I don't care what other people outside of the game say it should be. It is always the DM running the game that says yes or no, regardless of any established rules or anything. You're playing in their game. You're not playing in your game. If you don't like it, leave and play in someone else's game or start your own. But don't try to min-max someone else's game and try to tell them how to run it, regardless. You have tacitly accepted that the Dungeon Master is the final arbiter of the game by joining the game session itself. Don't ever think that you can override them, because you can't and you won't. And if you do, that Dungeon Master needs to stop being a Dungeon Master. You think the best version of D&D is a combination of editions. There are great ideas in each, and you think people who say 5th edition is completely awful or 2nd edition is completely awful are missing out. All right, so let's see. We talked about the behaviors, how to engage with the power gamer. Offer magic items as hooks. Give them a little reason to stay involved and invested. Provide encounters that spotlight their mechanics so that they feel like they're being heard as players. And then give quantifiable progression, whether that's through XP, milestone, or ranks in the game. Give them something so they feel like they've earned something, because they're putting in effort. They're not sitting back and not doing anything. And look, they're still good players. I mean, some of them can be toxic, but that goes for every player type. So you just need to make sure as a DM, if you have one of these players in your game, as with every player type, pay a little attention to them and let them have an opportunity to shine. So, pitfalls of the power gamer: overshadowing less optimized players. There's nothing worse than seeing someone constantly doling out double-digit damage and you never hitting. That sucks as a player. And so it's just one of those things that maybe they could help the other player a little bit, you know? Hey, Amy, it's you. You're being outed. Hoarding treasure or treating party as sidekicks is another downside to a power gamer player type. You want to make sure that any type of engagement of party dynamic is ultimately a constructive one and not a destructive one. You're supposed to be working together as players and not against each other. And so as soon as it gets to a point where you're no longer collaborating and instead you're actually forcing them to go along with whatever you want to do, it's no longer a cooperative game and it's no longer fun for other players. So as a DM, you really do need to step in a little bit and have a conversation. All right, so the 5th player type that I wanted to talk about, there's 8 total, so we're almost here. The 5th player type is the Slayer player type. Now, the core motivations of the Slayer player type are combat adrenaline, defeating monsters, and unleashing destruction. These types of players love just annihilating foes, you know, in one smack, just throwing, like that scene from Lord of the Rings where it's showing Sauron just wading into the armies of the free men, and he's just like, people are flying around as he hits them with his mace. That's the Slayer type that they love. A lot of fun to have as players. Behaviors that they exhibit: they choose simple, direct options to get into the fight fast. They enjoy mowing through enemies and seeing vivid descriptions of carnage. And they have little patience for long social or puzzle scenes. Now, these behaviors can be a lot of fun, but again, if they get super bored and they're just like clearly not paying attention when social encounters are happening, and you ask them what they have to do, what they want to do, and you have to then go over everything you just went over, you know, sort of synopsis or TLDR so that they can make a choice, well, then that disrupts the entire table. And so it can be a problem. So some of the pitfalls you want to watch with Slayer player types are killing NPCs who are just meant to be talked to, and pushing past story content just to reach combat. Remember, role-playing is a mix of literal storytelling and combat mechanics and puzzle solving. Not every one player type can dominate the entire game, and you always have to work with other players, even if it's not your favorite moment. And ultimately, as a player, are you trying just to like destroy everything the DM is setting up for you? Usually there's like an overarching story they're trying to tell. When you check out, you're actually telling them that all the effort that they put into it is not worth your time. So then why are you even at the table? So as much as the DM has to reach out to all the different player types and sort of make them feel welcome and valuable, the players need to show reciprocal respect to the time it takes the DM to put together a session or a campaign in total, and know that while not every encounter is germane to the entire story itself, sometimes they are. And so paying attention actually shows them that you care about being a part of the game and you don't just want to go up to the next monster and destroy them. So, I like having a nice mix of player types. And like I said before, usually people straddle a couple of these different archetypes depending on how they feel on a given day or in a given campaign. And so you always just have to be fluid and flexible as a dungeon master. All right, so the next one is the player type of storyteller. This player type loves contributing to a larger narrative and seeing the plot unfold. I love this type of a player character. Some of their behaviors is they write extensive player and character backstories tied to the world. They enjoy recurring characters, foreshadowing, and themes. They like to prioritize cohesion over rules or optimizations. That's a lot of fun, but there are downsides to it we'll get to in a second. Now, how do you as a DM engage with the storyteller type player? You use their backstory to shape adventure arcs. I always like to talk with players, understand where their character comes from, because I'm going to be weaving it in. And if you don't tell me anything, if you don't give me anything, then I'm going to make it up, because I want you to feel like you're a living part of the world, and that NPCs that you run into who have maybe connections with your family or connections with you in some way, or people that you know, it makes you feel a little bit more immersed into the setting, and it provides opportunities later on to bring up drama and role-playing when those players might be kidnapped or murdered or are in desperate need. They can actually help move characters in a specific direction in order to further the plot itself. So how do you engage? You use their backstory to shape adventure arcs. You ensure that every session advances the plot. This is something that can be very challenging. And as a DM, I've run into this a lot with every single campaign I have ever run. You set up a whole bunch of options saying, look, here's a whole bunch of different things that can happen and different ways you can go. And the players just don't pick up on any of them. They just completely do their own thing. Now, that's fine, and you can adjust from that point, but when they seem to be bored and not sure what to do after you've shown so many options for them to pursue, you can actually feel a little defeated as a DM. I'm clearly not signaling this clear enough. I'm not connecting with my players enough, or they just don't care about this campaign, and I'm wasting my time. It can get to that point very easily. So you always need to make sure that in every session, there's some reference to the overarching plot, and there's some sort of mission or goals they have to achieve in order to further that plot. Otherwise, they're floating the breeze, and they're relying on you as the DM to show them what they need to do. Build NPCs with motives and connections to uncover. Not everyone is black and white, and not every NPC is an enemy. But presenting NPCs gives the opportunity for players to uncover different plot points, gives them an opportunity to just meet colorful characters and break up the monotony of combat and travel. And it's something that I've done a number of times. Just introduce an NPC, literally for no reason, just for fun, and see where it takes the players. And it doesn't always go the way I expect it. In fact, it rarely goes the way I expect it to go. But it's always interesting seeing, and you can always gauge the players' feelings in a campaign by how they react to NPCs. If they're instantly trying to kill them, well, then clearly you've put up way too many combat situations for them where they think everything is a murder scenario. And if they don't pay any attention to them at all, then maybe they need some sort of combat help to break up the role-playing monotony of it. There are some pitfalls, like I mentioned earlier, to this storyteller player type. They try to become the main character or the of the whole campaign often. And it's difficult when you do have someone that wants to be the main character in any campaign, because ultimately all of the characters are the main characters. And it's the dungeon master's job to make sure that every character, maybe not in the same session, but every character has an opportunity to really shine so that they feel like they're a valuable member of the team and that they are connected to the world as a whole. And there's a reason why they're doing what they're doing. So making sure that one player is not focused on over all of the others is really important. And then steering other player characters' actions to fit their ideal story. Now, that ideal story that the storyteller is trying to push other characters into is one of their own making. It's not what the DM is trying to do in almost every case. And so, again, the DM needs to be very clear with this type of player character. And look, you're telling them that they should be doing this. Let them make their own choices. It's okay for you to provide options, but you're sort of pushing them a little bit too much. So just if you could back off a little bit, give them suggestions and let them decide on their own. That's a really important conversation to have in any game. If players feel like other people are playing their characters, then there's no reason for them to be there. And that's a horrible place to be as a player. All right, so the seventh player type that I want to talk about is the thinker. Their core motivations are tactical planning, puzzles, logical solutions, and minimizing risk. Now, this is a great player to have, especially if you're going to be presenting puzzles or difficult plot points to uncover. The behaviors they exhibit, they treat encounters as puzzles to solve, which can be fun. They prefer careful plans to impulsive action or acting in character. And that can be a little bit rough because then you're suffering from indecision by overthinking. And they enjoy outsmarting the scenario more than the actual combat itself. And so they like to sort of plan the battlefield as from the sort of 3,000 foot level rather than actually get in there and just engage. So how as a DM do you engage with the thinker player type? You need to include mysteries. You've got to include tactical puzzles and you've got to layer in challenges so that it's not always just a combat encounter. It's not always just an encounter where you have to solve a problem. Sometimes you just need to have a situation unfold through cognitive discipline and exploration. You need to reward them by planning shortcuts or one-sided victories. If they are going to go through all the time of tactically considering options, then as a DM, reward them with that. Let them feel like they solved something genuine, and that just feeds into their love of the game. And then ultimately, give them time to think between choices. I am one of those individuals that, unless the game is the encounter is dragging down to the point that it is just players don't remember what's happening between actions and you have to recap, that's when I start putting a timer on actions. But until then, I'm trying to let them take their time to really evaluate the situation. As long as you're invested in the actual events, then it's awesome. But if your initiative comes up and you're like, I don't know, what's going on? Well, then I have no patience for you because you're clearly not paying any attention to the game. You're showing disrespect to the other players and you're showing disrespect to me by not paying attention as the DM. So you really, before your turn comes up, if you're a tactical thinker, examine what is going on when it's going on so that you can plan out your next move. Don't ever just sit and wait for your turn to be called and then start thinking. That is horrible for the flow of the game and it's horrible for other players. And it just means you're not invested. You just don't care, you know? You're like, well, it's not my turn, so I'm not going to pay attention. So some pitfalls to watch. Paralyzing the party with overanalysis. That can be a problem. Commanding others like pieces on a chessboard, that's also a problem because, again, you're playing their character rather than them playing their character. And that's not fun for anyone. So all of this, whenever it comes to pitfalls to watch, and all of these notes, they're going to be on my website tomorrow when I publish this episode on the website. I have to wait for YouTube to process the videos and stuff. And then I download them, rip the audio file, put them up in the podcast, and I launch the page the day after all these streams. But if you want to look at all of these, I even have like a little chart of them at the very end of the article. It's going to be there forever, so you can just check it out and look at the different player types, how to engage with them, and the potential pitfalls of that player type as well. So the last one, oh wow, I'm actually going through this pretty quick. Only a half an hour here. The last one I wanted to talk about of the player types was the Watcher. Now, the Watcher enjoys the social environment more than the game and mechanics themselves. And the behaviors of a Watcher are, they show up for friends rather than immersion. They're quiet, laid back, and they rarely initiate anything in the game. They're happy to follow the group's lead and fill needed roles, but they don't actually engage very much with the game. The Watcher is one of those player types that I really don't enjoy having in the game at all. I like players who are invested in the game, who want to play, who want to be involved, not people who just are going to sit back and be like, whatever, I don't care. Just what should I do? And asking other people what they should do. That's someone that's just going to drag the game, and they're clearly just there to hang out. They're not there for the game. So they need to find a different hobby that doesn't require cognitive thinking so that they can enjoy it. But some people do just like having numbers at their table, and so they don't mind having the Watcher there. So how do you engage with this type if you do have them? Provide gentle prompts with decisions to involving them. So what I like to do when I have someone who might be a little paralyzed with choices is to just give them options, alternatives. Like, okay, well, you could do this, you could try that, you could do this. It's really sort of up to whatever you want. And try to incentivize them to think creatively on their own. But if they can't, they can always just choose one of the options that I laid out. Never only give one option, because then you're just railroading. You're telling them what to do and you're playing their character. Give them options, because sometimes with so many potential choices, sometimes that can be too much for a Watcher player type. So you need to involve them, give them a choice, like narrow the choices down so that they're like, okay, if these are my choices, I'm probably going to do this one. And then they feel like they're actually an active member and not a hindrance in any way. And that's important for players. So don't force deep involvement or spotlight moments. Look, if they're clearly checked out, don't try to involve them in heavy role playing. There's nothing worse than going to someone and saying, I'm just going to, like, the liege lord of the city approaches you and starts asking you about your outfit and where you acquired it. If the player is just a Watcher, they're going to have no idea how to respond to that at all. And be like, the store? I don't, and then, if you as a DM don't know that they're a Watcher player type, and that's the response you get, that's your clue that they don't really care. So don't include them in those heavy role-playing moments because they're clearly not invested in them. It's not a part of how they find fun. All right, so some of the pitfalls to watch for the Watcher player type. They can get distracted with phones and TV because they're not there for the game. They're just there for the social aspect. And sometimes they wander off during critical moments. Literally just walk away without saying anything to anyone. You're just like, what? But we're playing, and it happens. What are you going to do? It happens. So with every one of these archetypes that I listed out there for player types, we have the actor, we have the explorer, we have the instigator, we have the power gamer, we got the slayer, the storyteller, the thinker, and the watcher. Everyone at some time is going to fall into one of these player archetypes. And you as the DM really need to have a basic understanding of them so that you can try to meet the player where the player is. Don't try to force them into a lane that they're not comfortable with, because then they're not going to have fun. And if you as a DM simply cannot deal with any one of these player types, you need to have an honest conversation with the player and explain to them that they're not fitting your game and that you would like them to graciously leave. Otherwise, you just kick them from the game, and it's not gracious at all. But you need to have that conversation sometimes, and it's horrible to have it. Thankfully, I've never had to have that conversation. Players that just don't enjoy my games leave my games, and that's how I prefer it. But if you do have to like get someone out, you just need to be honest with them. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Be nice, be polite, be respectful, but they're clearly not really meshing with the game, and that's a problem for everyone, not just you and not just them, for everyone at the table. So for everyone's sake, be an adult and have an adult honest conversation. All right. So again, I have a chart with all of this on my website, so go check that out tomorrow. That's all I had for this player types DM101 episode. Do you guys fit into any of these player types? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Puzzles are always great. I've definitely included some already in some of our campaigns that we're running, and then there's going to be others later on, a lot more later on in the campaign. And then if you feel like you straddle a couple different player types, which ones, and what causes you to go from one player type to another in any given situation? I'm interested in hearing. Ultimately, all of this is just to make us better dungeon masters and better players. And so that's really why I want to have these conversations. It's more fun examining the game in this format, in my opinion, than it is like just hammering people over the head during the game, trying to get them to be what you want them to be rather than what they actually just naturally are. So it's nice to be able to identify potential archetypes and player types and then address them in-game as the Dungeon Master so that everyone around the table is having a good time. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate your time and attention. That's going to do it for this Dungeon Mastering 101 Player Types episode. Do you have any tips or tricks based on your experience as a player or a Dungeon Master? Was it off base on any of my suggestions of player archetypes? Feel free to email me at info@dealsaga.com or leave a comment below. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, ring the bell, and you can support this channel by becoming a patron on Patreon or a member on YouTube. You can also pick up Dragonlance Gaming Media using my affiliate link. All links in the description below. I want to give a quick shout out and thank to creator patron Aaron Hardy and developer patron Chris Androu. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you so much for joining in that celebration. So until next time, my name's Adam with Dragonlance Saga. Until next time. Which I just said like 3 times. Slan Jabbar.